Welcome to The Review, a Rev partnership podcast, where we host conversations that share the power of public education and its impact on our region. I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Brands. In each episode, we will explore the stories, insights, and conversations that shape the future of student learning and growth in our region. Tarrant County is a community with incredible power and potential. At the heart of this power is our public education. Education is more than just a foundation. It's a catalyst for transformation. Let's jump into the episode. Welcome to The Review, a Rev partnership podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Brands. Today's episode, we're breaking down what is happening in this 89th legislative session and what it means for our local schools. From pre-K to teacher pipelines, we'll explore how leaders are responding to these changes and why it's so important for our region to have a clear, united voice on legislative issues. Today, I am joined by three wonderful guests and experts on the issue: Dr. Joe Harrington, the Superintendent of HEB ISD, Catherine Davis, the Policy Director at Child Care Associates, and Dr. Matt Smith, the Superintendent of Arlington ISD. Thank you all for joining us. We're excited for your perspective to contribute to the conversation. We're really going to kind of walk through what do we know so far this legislative session. And one thing we do know for sure is that there's still a lot to be decided. There are a lot of footballs on the 1 yard line and decisions that are coming out of the gate, final decisions, even in the next 24 to 48 hours as this podcast goes live. We're going to break down kind of what we know and how this is going to then impact new activities and actions that are happening across our early learning through K-12 system in Tarrant County. When legislative sessions end, it always brings new work to our school districts, new guidelines and parameters, things to react to, and how you're anticipating setting those up. And also truly what you're already doing that sets you off that starting line to be ready for what's coming down the pike for all of you. So as we get started this morning, we'll turn it to Catherine to give us a lay of the land of what we know both at a state level, but also we know we're watching some activity at the federal level related to Head Start and early Head Start funding that will not only impact the children here in Tarrant County that are in Head Start and early Head Start programs, but will impact our public schools as these kids come into our public school systems as kindergarten, first, second, and beyond. So thanks for joining us today, Catherine.
Sure, happy to be here. So I'll start with the state legislature because there's a lot happening, as you alluded to, a lot changing, a lot that's yet to be kind of seen. But I also just want to lead with what I think everyone here already knows is that early learning doesn't magically begin when a child enters pre-kindergarten. Early learning begins at birth, and 95% of a child's brain development, 95% is happening in the first 5 years of life. And so for many children, a lot of that early learning happens in the home, but for many other children, it happens both at home and in the context of a community-based early learning center, often as early as 6 weeks of age when that parent is returning to work. And so I think it's important to think from a policy perspective, not just about our public school system and our community-based early learning system, but really to think about them as a single team and to think about policy making that happens in tandem with one another, not just in these siloed child care policy or early learning policy and ISD policy. And so from the early learning perspective, I think pre-K and what we've seen in pre-K has been a huge win for a lot of families, a lot of school districts. We've really expanded our access to pre-kindergarten over the last several years. And at the same time, that's also had some implications on the rest of our early learning system. And so it's creating some challenges for our child care programs. It's creating challenges for parents of infants and toddlers as children are leaving community-based early learning settings and going into school districts. It's increasing prices for infants and toddlers and often pricing families out. And so one of the ways to think about more cohesion in our early learning system has been through pre-K partnerships. And that's really when school districts and community-based early learning centers partner together to serve pre-kindergarten students, really by subcontracting out services to pre-kindergarten services to children in community-based early learning settings. And so we've seen a lot of movement, although not the kind of headline of our early learning bills. We've seen a lot of movement on pre-K partnerships this legislative session. So a lot's left to be seen, but we're seeing increased funding potentially for pre-K partnerships, which will really help make both a financial incentive for districts, a win for districts, and a financial incentive and a win for community-based early learning settings. We're seeing some supports for teachers in childcare settings that are engaging in pre-K partnerships so that we can invest in the childcare teacher and potentially create pipelines from a childcare educator into potentially an ISD setting. We're seeing some bureaucratic hurdles that are being removed in terms of eligibility for pre-kindergarten in community-based settings. And then we're also seeing some potentially challenging things for pre-K partnerships in creating additional requirements for districts. So one thing that we're a little bit concerned about is the a requirement in a few pieces of legislation that are moving right now that would require districts engaging in pre-K partnerships to pass through 90% of their resources to the child care program. We know that districts incur costs engaging in pre-K partnerships, and enabling them to only retain 10% of that funding could actually disincentivize pre-K partnerships. So while we see a lot of really great things happening on the pre-K partnership front, there are a few potentially concerning things that we're watching, and we're hopeful that gets resolved in the next few days. Additionally, we're seeing additional funding into the pre-K system in general. So there's a lot of talk about increasing the early education allotment by including pre-kindergarten age students to generate the early education allotment. We're seeing children of teachers are now qualifying potentially for pre-kindergarten, which would be a win across the board. And, those are really kind of the big things we're seeing. There's also some much more broader school funding implications that impact both pre-kindergarten and kind of the K-12 pipeline as well. But like you said, a lot remains to be seen, but we've been happy with a lot of the progress that we're seeing in the early learning 0 to 5 kind of space.
A couple big wins that I heard you talk about were, number one, expanding the definition of preschool eligibility to include teachers. I know that's something we've heard from our superintendents and our district leaders, how important it would be for teachers to be able to send their kids to preschool in general, and especially the preschool in the school district where they are employed. And the other thing I heard you say that sounds like it would be moving, definitely towards a win would be including in that early education allotment, which school districts use to fund lots of pieces related to curriculum instruction, teacher support, even preschools, in those earliest years of education, and including preschool students as a student that's counted towards the district's allocation in that space. But the big takeaway, I think, and to make sure that it's said again, because it is so important, that 90% of a child's brain is developed in their first 5 years of life. And so when a caregiver of a child is making a decision about where that child needs to be cared for based on the family circumstances, that they could send their child to a early Head Start program as little as 6 weeks old. And there are some uncertainties, it sounds like, at the federal level about the status of some of that Head Start and early Head Start funding to kids in Tarrant County.
Yep, absolutely. And just to clarify before I go into the Head Start, families are sending their 6 weeks old and potentially into Head Start, but also into our community-based childcare programs as well. Our Head Start program is, a really phenomenal program that provides intensive wraparound supports and extremely high quality early education to our most vulnerable population of students. It is a federal grant that is disseminated to local communities. And so in Tarrant County, Child Care Associates operates the majority of that grant. We serve about 900 young children and dozens of pregnant mothers as well. Through our Head Start program. And so, as I'm sure everyone is aware, the federal administration has made it a priority to reduce government spending, and some of that has happened at both Health and Human Services, Department of Education, but Health and Human Services is where both Head Start and the Child Care Development Block Grant sit. And so Unfortunately, because of some of the reductions in force up at the federal level, it's created some unintended funding delays with the grants here locally in Tarrant County. And so our grant, it looks different from community to community, but Tarrant County's grant ends June 31st. It's on a June 31st to June 31st cycle. And so because of some of these unintended funding delays, we have still not been notified as to whether or not our grant will be renewed. And so Texas is a state that follows the WARN Act, which is an act that says if there is a law that says if there is the potential for a layoff in the future, staff members and employees have to be given a 60-day notice. Mm-hmm. And so for what that means in Tarrant County, given this uncertainty of our federal grant, on May 1st, the WARN Act was triggered for our Head Start programs. And so we had to notify all of our staff and our families that we serve that potentially on June 31st, our services would ramp down. And so, that has been a challenge. I do want to say the good news is that the president's new, quote, skinny budget does include full funding for Head Start. So we take that as a win. We've also seen recent memorandums coming out of the federal government that are actually pointing to Head Start as a model for how we can better coordinate services locally, how we can better expand parent choice. So we're taking all of these as potential positive bellwethers. We've also gotten news from the federal government that grants will be renewed. We're still working under uncertainty. We don't know exactly what that timeline looks like. So we'll continue to operate as if we may be ramping down services on June 31st. And so because, that creates uncertainty for our staff and that creates uncertainty for our families, as an organization, we have determined that we will pause services for the summer, effective June 1. And so what that means is over the summer, there will be approximately 900 families and pregnant mothers who will not have access to these services throughout the summer. We're hopeful that we'll be able to restart again in the fall. But, we really have to account for the fact that staff may begin looking for other jobs. Families may be looking for other early learning services for their children. Mm-hmm. And there's also kind of a launch sequence that we have to go through to both ramp down and ramp back up. So we're really trying to be thoughtful about that and ensure that we're doing everything as intentionally as possible. And I will say, last week was Teacher Appreciation Week. I was out on campuses. I was working with teachers. We were actually there giving teachers breaks so that they could go get lunch or go to the bathroom. How crazy is that? And, I had a teacher tell me, she was asking me, what are my thoughts on everything that's happening? We were kind of talking about it. And she just said, we know I've got 60 days to impact kids. 60 days. And I think that just speaks so eloquently to the heart and the soul of the educators in these communities that are really here to do right by kids and families. So we hate that there's going to be a pause in services for families. We know that has real Main Street impacts for families, for teachers, for job uncertainty. But we're hopeful that we'll be back and operating soon.
So, Catherine, draw a comparison for us. When COVID hit, community-based childcare closed for a brief amount of time, but was also one of the fastest sectors of our region to reopen as it was seen as a critical workforce. So draw a comparison between kind of what we might be seeing this summer in terms of closures and how that compared to closures during COVID.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, obviously when COVID hit, families, the world shut down. Families pulled their kids out of school, out of childcare. We haven't necessarily seen enrollment rebound. I know pre-K hasn't necessarily seen their enrollment rebound. Childcare also hasn't necessarily seen our enrollment rebound. But childcare programs were the ones that were on the front lines opening because some people still did have to go to work in COVID. And I'll let my school district counterparts speak to kind of what they're seeing as these COVID babies, if you will, are now entering our K-12 system. Mm-hmm. But for some families, particularly our more vulnerable populations, this pause in services and their early education that they receive every day is really critical to their development. For some kids, it's the only warm meal they get for the entire day. For some kids, their home life is maybe a little bit chaotic. This is the most stability that they have. And so Our families are wonderful, and they're in Head Start because they want to put their family on a path to success. But we are worried about what this pause in service could mean for some of our really vulnerable kiddos.
Okay, that'll certainly be something to watch. Yeah. And you talked about what's happening in the state related to this legislative session related to preschool. And we also know there's a number of other big education bills that are moving through the House and Senate. Probably the biggest bill on the K-12 side that's getting headlines and really to the focus of education committees is House Bill 2, kind of thought of as this legislative session's omnibus education funding bill. It also has a large component related to our teacher workforce, and even to on the special education side, some big pieces there. And so this year, the superintendents of Tarrant County, the 17 superintendents that represent 750,000 kids across our region, they said it would be important if we spoke as one voice on issues that we all share a commonality around. And I kind of think this is the biggest Venn diagram you can create when you get 17 school districts in a room, all with their circle of priorities and interests and needs, and how do you find where all 17 Venn diagrams intersect. And Dr. Harrington led that process with his peers on October 1st at the Rev Partnership Superintendent Kickoff Breakfast. So Joe, talk to us about that process and how you got all of your wonderful and strong and opinionated colleagues to coalesce around kind of two shared, united ideas this legislative session.
When you asked me to facilitate that, it's what we do in HEB. We're a continuous improvement district, and we have our CI tools. We follow the Baldrige categories, and when we put all that together and we use our tools, we find that we can create processes and systems to get to the root cause and to find solutions. So the tools we used that day, we started off with a brainstorming activity. So we handed out sticky notes to all of the superintendents, and we said, write down your legislative priorities. So just list them all. And so they began. We took a few minutes and we just wrote them out, just one idea per sticky note. And then my deputy superintendent was with me. We started collecting them and we affinitized them. And so we got them up on the whiteboard and we separated them into groups, and then we gave them dots and said, all right, prioritize, put your dots on the priorities that you think are most important. And in a very short period of time, we had two clear areas that the group basically voted on. And so, the pre-K and then the teacher pipeline.
Yeah. So we're going to take you on the road. You are going to the road of compromise and mutual agreement, since you did such a good job, here in the region, and we know we can use a lot of that as we're figuring out a path this legislative session and on a number of different issues. And the two priorities that superintendents identified, kind of more fully funding preschool, full day preschool, and then lots of lanes in the highway to fill every teaching spot with an effective and caring teacher were the two priorities. We're really back to in regional data that our superintendents looked at. In Tarrant County, our school districts enroll 47% of the eligible 3 and 4-year-olds in their preschool classrooms. And in Tarrant County, students who attend preschool have a 26% point higher preschool readiness indicator than their peers who are eligible for preschool who don't attend. So data really supports that when a child comes to your preschool classrooms, it is a academically and developmentally appropriate space for them to be. And on the educator side, we know that every school district is investing in pathways to support, prepare, onboard highly effective teachers. And we know that our teaching workforce has become a more challenging landscape in recent years. Just in the last couple of years, the percentage of teachers who are within their first 5 years of the profession is about a third of all of our current teaching workforce. So teachers are younger, they're more novice, and two, they have fewer expert, tenured professionals to learn and grow and gain professional development from. We've also seen the number of teachers who are not certified increase in our region. This opportunity was provided, especially in that CTE space and districts of innovation. But we also now see it in our elementary schools, where we've seen a 20% increase in the number of teachers that are uncertified who are teaching kids in reading and math. And that those teachers, out of a recent study done by Higher Ed in Texas, has shown that they don't produce the same student impact that a certified or even traditionally prepared teacher does. And when you think about teachers being the number one in-school factor to a student's success, this is really, I think, where data shows, and the superintendents agreed, we need to speak as one voice around how we create pathways to bolster the effective pathways to teaching for the 48,000 teachers we have in Tarrant County. And Dr. Smith, I know Arlington, long before this legislative session, made preschool a priority. Understood that the earlier you can get kids into your system, the stronger that creates a foundation for them going into early years and beyond. So talk to us about what Arlington has done to make an investment in those earliest years of life for kids.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, it's great joining a school district that has done outstanding work before, and Arlington has done that. I think we all know that the earlier we can get students in a loving, caring, warm learning environment, the better off they're going to be moving forward. And in Arlington ISD, we have almost 80% of our students that receive free and reduced lunch benefits. And we know that those students and their families often struggle with having literacy-rich environments and having learning experiences at the youngest ages. Yeah. So the investment was made by our Board of Trustees and our former superintendent, Dr. Cavazos, because we knew it would pay off for students long-term. And I'm proud of that work. So in Arlington, we have free universal pre-K for every student in the district. We use our own allotment funds, our general fund, in order to fund that. So there are no qualifications for that. Every student is accepted. Yeah. And they did that just because of exactly what you're describing, being able to give students the opportunity to begin learning in a warm, caring environment as early as possible in our school district. That investment also comes with dollars. We have dollars that were allocated and designated by our Board of Trustees in order to help us pull that off. And we're proud to say that we see data that shows us that the students that have enrolled in our pre-K system are much more ready for kindergarten when they go through. So that dollar investment absolutely pays off for our students, and we believe it pays off for our families as well.
Are there other impacts that you've seen of that? I mean, pretty big decision you guys made to take money from your general operating budget and to prioritize full day free preschool for kids.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that we see. We know, I'll share this one story real quickly. As an educator, one of the proudest moments and probably the most fulfilling moments I ever had was when I was a school principal and my daughter's pre-K was on my campus. And we see the impact of pre-Ks throughout our system on all of our school buildings because it creates the family atmosphere that I think teachers and school districts want to have. We want to have people and families in our schools, and those pre-K opportunities just expand that opportunity for everyone. So when you talked a little bit earlier about expanding the opportunity for teachers to be able to send their students to pre-K, we have that in Arlington ISD, and we see the benefits of the family atmosphere with our teacher workforce especially. I think we also see the socialization things that I think you alluded to a little bit earlier. COVID did impact a lot of families regarding socialization. That tablet or that phone has become a device that a lot of kids are on at a very young age. Yeah. And the more we can get students around each other in social settings to learn with each other and grow with each other in those social settings, we know that those student behaviors that we saw a rise in potentially as a result of COVID here, those tend to settle down. And so we see the impact on the family and the family atmosphere in our schools, but we also see the impact on student behavior.
That's great. And when we control, the most recent STAR results were released not too long ago, and when we control for economic disadvantage, we see that HEB is really a leader in the pack across our region. And we have to, think about and bring it to you, Joe, to say, like, what are you doing? What's the secret sauce in HEB? And we have to imagine there's a teacher component, an investment that HEB has made in preparing, training, and setting teachers as the highest priority across your district. So tell us a little bit about, how you and HEB have seen the legislative priority that superintendents agreed upon about effective teachers, the investments that you're making in your district around that?
That's to be successful. The teacher is the most important factor, and you have to support the teacher, but give them the tools to be successful. One of the things we do in HEB is we have a managed curriculum, and so, you go to any third grade classroom across our 21 elementaries, and we're teaching the same thing within a day across the entire district. We feel like that consistency allows our teachers to better work together across campuses, across the entire district. It helps our students. There's mobility across our district. If a child changes schools, there's no change. We're covering the same things at the same time. Building robust curriculum and tools for our teachers and giving them those pieces. Everything we want to do to help them be effective. The teacher matters. Studies Marzano's mega-analysis, the teacher matters. And so giving them the tools so that they can be successful, making sure we're honoring them, making sure we're trying to compensate them appropriately. But all those things are what we do to build an effective workforce and then to see the results. I mentioned we're a Baldrige district. We're very process-driven. By having those processes in place, by supporting those teachers, the common assessments, it creates the conversations, the collegial conversations between the teachers so that everybody can get better. That we're not looking at one person getting better, we're looking at everyone, and that's taking the kids further. That's the thing. Everything we do is so whatever's next in these kids' lives, because we don't know what will be their next thing, but we want to get them set up that they're going to be successful no matter what.
Yeah. And House Bill 2 has some significant language around teacher preparation. It looks at expanding teacher pay kind of across the board and through pay through teacher incentive allotment, expanding the teacher incentive allotment to include an additional designation so more teachers are eligible for those dollars. It also includes conversation about ramping down the percentage of uncertified teachers that districts have. And Arlington ISD was really out the gate with the partnership with UTA and how they set up an alternative certification program to really move the uncertified teachers in our region to becoming certified. And that partnership was brokered between the 17 of your school districts and UTA, who really looked at that non-certified teacher data and said, we can answer the call on this, and really stepped up to provide school districts a pathway to go to a higher ed partner and get their teacher certified, and have that be, and it's something to consider that didn't just include for-profit partners that were at the disposal of many districts prior to the partnership with UTA. And again, Arlington, you guys are right in the backyard of UTA, so you had to be out of the gate first on this. And you've sent a number of teachers this year in the cohort. So talk a little bit, Matt, about Arlington's investment in teachers, maybe specifically kind of what you're doing for those non-certified teachers and to create career ladders and the competencies for them to come back and enter the classrooms.
Yeah, again, it's nice to join a district that had some balls in motion already on some of these things. And Arlington had, in a time of teacher shortage, really worked hard to ensure that we were trying to get pathways open for people to become certified while they were helping us fill some gaps a few years ago. And agree wholeheartedly, the number one thing that impacts students is a highly qualified teacher in the classroom. So this partnership with the UTA really spoke to us because we were able to not only have an additional pathway for teachers, but also to ensure quality control of that pathway. When Joe talks about the impact of the teacher in the classroom and what they do on a regular basis, we know that they're learning and how to actually teach. The pedagogy involved in the process matters in all of this. So with a great partnership with UTA, we're able to ensure that we're getting the quality experience that we want in that teacher preparation program for the people who are in our classrooms. That being said, we always want to make sure that we're reducing the number of uncertified teachers that we hire and make sure that we're hiring highly qualified teachers. So when we add both of those two things together, the students benefit. And we're excited about that partnership with the UTA and the ability to continue to evolve. one of the things that I think this region really benefits from is people who are willing to come to the table, talk about what's working, what's not working, and how we continuously improve, continuously get better for the sake of our kids. And we've seen that in this program.
We have. I mean, school districts came back to UTA and said, hey, we have some feedback on the observations that you are doing of our teacher candidates. And UTA responded and said, we'll get out to your school districts, observe it in the classroom, make sure that this alt-cert program has the components of highly effective alternative certification programs. It's not just an online sit and get, once that timer runs out on the virtual module that you get the checkbox and you get to move on, that it's really making sure it's bringing in kind of research-backed effective practices of alt-cert programs so that teachers are well prepared. We know, too, again, the teacher incentive allotment was passed two legislative sessions ago, and has been rolled out across districts across the state and in Tarrant County. And Joe, HEB made the big decision to get started on that work this spring to support teachers with additional funding streams. And so talk to us a little bit about the big decision that was, but ultimately kind of what the core value of making sure that you are compensating and appreciating teachers for the contributions that they are bringing to student learning in HEB.
So, the struggle we've had with the teacher incentive allotment is, we have sat back and watched, and the reason is I would prefer a system where I can pay all our teachers. And so within the structure that is there, we have hesitated. But as we continue to see that this pathway is not changing, we need to make sure that we're providing the opportunity for all of our teachers to take advantage of the ability to earn the additional money that the teacher incentive allotment allots. My thing is we need to continue to find ways to compensate our teachers, but we've got to compensate many more teachers than what we're seeing. And so we're going to work really hard. We've seen some of our neighboring districts really work hard at it to really have a good number of teachers qualify. That's been my concern. My concern is I don't want to create a system that only rewards some of our teachers. We have great teachers in every subject. We have great teachers across the board. And if we're going to maintain the priority of this profession, we can't judge the different places. The whole piece coming together is what produces these kids. The public school and the power of the public school. We have one of our board members always says, kids don't come to school for algebra. I always tease them. I've met a couple. But that's it. These other programs, choir and athletics and the CTE programs and all of that, it all comes together to produce what we're trying to do, to get these kids ready for the world that, like we said, we don't know what that world will be but we just want them to be ready for whatever it is. And so we're gonna take that journey because we want to make sure that all of our teachers have the opportunity with the incentive allotment. But I can tell you personally, I'm going to continue to push for paying all our teachers. And that's where I think it becomes more powerful. But in the meantime, we're going to make sure our people have the opportunity to earn those additional funds.
Well, you're out of the gate early on this. If by some estimates, the additional tier of teachers could increase the number of eligible teachers for TIA funding by 30%. And so that would get closer to kind of what, your vision is that making sure we're raising the teacher pay bar for teachers across, your entire district and the region as a whole. I mean, another example of where Tarrant County could be off the starting line faster if this piece of House Bill 2 makes it to the final draft is it mentions pathways for high school students to become teachers. And in April, CTE students from 10 of your peer districts gathered at Tarleton State for a Tarrant County Future Educator Signing Day. 300 kids walked across the stage at Tarleton State. They got their name announced, they got a pin, and they signed a banner that was brought back to your district sharing their commitment to pursue a teaching degree in higher ed and then go back to our region and be the future teachers of Tarrant County. And if you ever doubted for a minute the future of education or the future of leaders in Tarrant County, you just needed to be in that room. I mean, there were seniors who were graduating from your high schools this spring, and there were sophomores and juniors who were choosing that CTE pathway and just getting started. And they were full of energy. They were cheering for each other. They were cheering for other school districts. I mean, they were so pumped about their decision to be a teacher. It was really quite inspiring. And as these students are kind of early adopters of the program, but as the Tarrant County Future Educator program grows, students will be able to, through your high school CTE education and training programs, earn dual enrollment credits in higher ed that incentivizes their path to go to higher ed to pursue a teaching degree and come back and teach. And by some estimates, or we estimate that is a cost savings of $13,000 to them and almost a whole semester of college. And that's the real deal when you're thinking about the two barriers to persisting to become a teacher being compensation and how fast can you get back into that full-time employment. This is a path to say to these students, we honor and recognize what you've done in high school, especially that student teaching component that they do. And we want to recognize that through college credit, and we want to get you back into the classroom faster. And so as that piece of House Bill 2 moves through to consideration for final language, it would be an example of where Tarrant County is already off the starting line in fulfilling that piece of the legislation to have pathways for high school students to become the future teachers of Tarrant County. And I highlight that because that was an example of your CTE and HR directors from across the region saying we need to honor this CTE program and the teaching profession in this way, and brokering that partnership with higher ed to get that done. And this is the first year that kids are earning those dual enrollment credits. Okay, so maybe too, as we, there's a couple other bills we're probably watching. House Bill 4 is a big accountability bill, pieces around the STAR assessment, around would it be a norm referenced assessment, some pieces there that we'll be continuing to pay attention to, as we know that those pieces will impact how you assess students, and connected to the A to F accountability system, which superintendents got the chance to speak on that topic at the end of year celebration panel. And what that state accountability assessment has why it got held up. So that's a piece that I know will get some careful eyes in these final days of session, as will House Bill 123, which I know the House thinks they feel quite clever with the title of it being 123, since it's really related to early math and literacy. So a couple other things just to put on people's radars as they're gaining some momentum and excitement. And in these final days, we might see some final decisions on those pieces too. But as we wrap up, and we are moving to the final minutes of this podcast, even though the legislative session will continue. I think they're now 7 days a week working down there in Austin to finish things up. There's no more Sunday reprieves until session is concluded. A couple closing thoughts from each of you to hear your perspective on. First off, as we kind of move to the end of the session, what are pieces that you're watching for, especially from the vantage point of what would be a win? A win for public education, a win for your school districts, and really at the end of the day, a win for kids. And maybe Matt, we'll start with you and kind of make sure we give everyone a chance to respond.
Yeah, I'll start with House Bill 2 right now that is currently in the Senate, and I believe the Lieutenant Governor released his the potential committee substitute guidance for House Bill 2. The funding piece is an important piece of this puzzle for us all, and all of the things that we've talked about this morning, funding is a linchpin for us to make things happen. And I think one of the most enlightening pieces of this legislative session was when the Legislative Budget Board at the beginning of the session shared that school districts needed a $9 billion plus investment to get back to constant dollars from 2019. And I think that's what we're watching right now. We're appreciative of House Bill 2 taking a step forward, but we also know that didn't even get us back to 2019 levels. And in order to offer the programs that you're talking about, in order to create the rich professional learning environments that we know matter for teacher development and our teacher workforce, we also have to have the funds to go with that. And that's not school districts sharing that dollar amount. That is the Legislative Budget Board sharing that dollar amount. So we are, I believe, all eagerly watching House Bill 2 to see how that plays out and to see what impacts that will have on us as a public school system. Ultimately, at the core of all this, the instructional core is really the interchange between the teacher, the student, and the content in the classroom. Yeah. And everything has to line up with that. The programs that we provide as a school district and that we fund as a school district through this allotment are super important to create that experience for students in the classroom. So that is one we are watching and very hopeful for, but also have some concern for as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Matt. Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to reiterate, that the success of our entire early childhood system is the success of our K-12 system. And so, just as much as we can continue as a region to uplift both our public schools, but also our broader early childhood system, I think is going to be critical to the success of our school districts. But I mentioned several of the policies within HB2 related to strengthening pre-K partnerships and that collaboration and bridge between our community-based early learning centers and public school districts. A few other things that we're watching on the early childhood side, there's been a proposed $100 million investment into childcare scholarships through the House supplemental budget, HB 500. It's yet to be seen what happens in the Senate, but what that means is, we have currently 90,000 young children sitting on the wait list for childcare scholarships, meaning their parents are waiting for these scholarships so that they can return to work or school. And so this $100 million would reduce that wait list by about 10,000 kids or provide around 10,000 additional childcare scholarships to young Texans. In Tarrant County alone, we have 20,000 young children on our childcare scholarship wait list. So while this is really a drop in the bucket, 10,000 kids out of 90, 20,000 locally, it's really important and is a positive step in getting more young children into the high quality care that their parents need so that they can return to work and school. The other piece of legislation that we're watching is a little bit of a sleeper, but it's HB 117. It's related to the governor's early childhood task force. And so this is actually pulling together leaders of the Texas Education Agency, Texas Workforce Commission, Health and Human Services, and other key early learning stakeholders, districts, child care administrators, to think about what is a strong and cohesive governance system for early childhood. There's been talk of a Department of Early Childhood Education in the past. It's yet to be seen whether this could potentially be a precursor to something like this. So we're really watching to see kind of where that goes. It's a priority of the governors. So that always helps when it's a priority of the governors. But like I said, we're watching to see kind of how that bill plays out as well.
So Catherine, the scholarships, 20,000 kids in Tarrant County are on the wait list for childcare.
Childcare scholarships, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And this could impact how many kids across the region or state?
So the $100 million in the House supplemental would fund about 10,000 scholarships statewide. So the way that would be allocated would be following kind of the traditional distribution model across the 28 regions where childcare scholarships are allocated. So what that means for Tarrant County is probably about 1,500 scholarships, which again, compared to the 20,000 that we have, is a drop in the bucket, but it's something. Mm-hmm. So we're really hopeful.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Dr. Harrington, what are you watching this session?
As Matt talked about, House Bill 2, and so let me, there's a group out there, Education Resource Group, and they evaluate and basically rank academic performance and also financial efficiency. HEB, for I think 13 of the last 14 years, was ranked the #1 most financially efficient district in the state. Because of that, I was asked to come and speak to the Texas DOGE Committee. One of the pieces that I pointed out, though, is, guys, we're the most financially efficient district in the state, and I'm running a significant budget deficit at the moment. That's the reality of the financial situation we're in. When districts are being attacked for what people are assuming is some sort of financial inefficiency. That's incorrect. All right, as the most efficient district in the state, and I'll take it, we're still running a negative budget. And as we've done the runs on House Bill 2, we'll still be a deficit budget after House Bill 2. It's what Matt just pointed out, is this doesn't bring us back to where we were. If we're going to produce what we're asked to produce, which is prepare these kids to be the leaders of the future, then we have to have the ability to offer the programs. And we talk about choice, and people want to, we need choice. We have choice in public schools. We have these programs, but those programs, we have to be funded so that we can run the programs to create the choice so that these kids have the opportunity to go all those different directions, fill all the needs we need in this country to be what we want to be. And so that's the piece that I think we just have to continue to emphasize is, guys, we're doing great things. We're the good guys. Texas Public Schools, we're the good guys. And we're taking care of our kids. And we're going to continue to take care of them. And we'll work through this. But yeah, we don't need anything else cut out of House Bill 2.
So as we go to a final question, I want you to fill in this sentence, fill in the blank to this sentence. I mean, we are all here today, and we're all watching this legislative session because we know that the decisions in Austin, they impact the day-to-day lives of how we operate school districts and how we operate early learning. And we know that for the 20,000 kids on the wait list, or the kids that are currently in Head Start and early Head Start programs whose centers will close for some amount of time this summer, those kids are going to come to our public schools. That is the pipeline to your enrollment in our K-12 system. And we need all of this operating at a high bar for us to achieve the goals that we share for students, and also too that our region strives to achieve for economic stability and mobility and growth. And so as we wrap up today, if you were to fill in the blank of I feel blank about the future of education in Tarrant County, what descriptor would you fill in to complete that sentence? And Dr. Smith, we'll start with you.
Of course, you had to start with me on that one.
We could go popcorn style.
I have to say that the first thing I thought was I feel hopeful still.
Yeah.
And that's because of what you said earlier. When you talk to our students and you see the students that are signing up to become teachers for the future, when you see the dance recital that I saw on Friday night, when you see our first graders working hard in the classroom with an amazingly effective teacher, I'm hopeful for the future. We have hurdles in front of us, and we know that. But I'm extremely hopeful because it's for the benefit of students, and we have good partners. Like our partnership with our fellow school districts, like HEB and other school districts around. Joe is absolutely right. There are people doing great things for students all across Tarrant County. I'm proud of that, and I'm hopeful for the future because of that.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Well, not to ride on your coattails, I was going to say hopeful too, but I think motivated, right? There's so much good happening that it would be wrong for none of us not to be motivated to work together and continue that momentum forward. There are a lot of challenges that remain, particularly in the early learning side of things, and so I just remain motivated and eyes forward as we continue to kind of chip away at all that's left to be done, while still standing proud about the progress that we've made. So,
thank you, Catherine.
Oh, you know me. My cup's not half full, it's always full. I do think, though, I think we need to continue with the positive belief that we have for our future. If we continue to do great things for our kids, if we continue to have, if we're working toward the right things, people with influence need to influence for good. And that's the thing. I think as long as we're working toward great things, if we're trying to take care of everyone, not someone, everyone, it's going to be great. We will work through this. We're going to continue to do the things that we need to do, and we will be fine. We talk about things that we see as a negative, like vouchers. Okay, I'm not scared of vouchers. I'm not worried about vouchers. I'm not friends with our private school friends. Those schools have always served a function. It is this idea that somehow there is the right and the wrong, the good and the bad. We all come together to take care of the needs, and there are options and have always been options and choices. And so it is not one is better than the other. It is we all exist. And like I said, we have no concerns on it. My concern has always been when we're fully funding our public schools, feel free to do what you need to do with that excess tax money. That's great. Mm-hmm. Fully fund us so that we can take care of the kids that have walked through our doors that are going to be a huge part of our future.
Well, thank you. A deep thank you to all three of you, not only for your time today, but for the persistence and commitment that you have to kids. I mean, you are watching this session and getting up every day to do your jobs because at the heart and soul of our education system in Tarrant County are these children who have chosen public schools, and that you are the responsible leaders to steward their academic journey through. So thank you for making that decision, for getting up every day, for persisting, for having a good attitude about it, and for joining us this morning for this conversation in the midst of very busy schedules, and that the rest of the day is great for all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Review, a Rev Partnership podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe and follow us so that you never miss an episode. For more information on Rev Partnership, please visit our website at revpartnership.org and follow us on social media. Until next time, thank you.